Everybody, Dr. Jones here, and in this video we are gonna unveil the science of a weight loss plateau, because we have to talk about what causes it, where it came from, for us to appreciate the actual solution. Because what you don't want to do, guys, when you're in a plateau is simply eat less or exercise more. That will likely work in the short term, but I promise you it's going to derail you after time and make it even more difficult to get out of that situation. We actually want to do the opposite, and this video is going to get into exactly why that is, what the solution looks like, and how do we prevent it moving forward to achieve our lasting weight loss. So I'm so excited, guys. Let's just dive right in. Okay, so in a literal sense, a weight loss plateau is this phenomena that happens with your body where the things that you were doing to lose weight are no longer working. And I know that's very generic, and I have plenty of other videos getting into that, but generally speaking, it is the caloric deficit. We have to be in a caloric deficit in order to lose weight, meaning your body has to be, over some period of time, burning more calories than it's consuming to achieve actual weight loss. What causes that? What influences it? All those other factors, that's like plenty of other videos that you guys can watch. But in essence, that's what is needed for weight loss. And so presumably you either decrease your consumption of food or you increase your exercise. Usually you're doing both and you start achieving weight loss. Great. Maybe you create this 500 calorie deficit per week. Maybe it's 200. It really doesn't matter. Okay. But some calorie deficit over every day, or at least over every week, because maybe you have a day where you don't have a caloric deficit, that's fine. As your weekly and your monthly calories in some sort of deficit, you will lose weight. But then all of a sudden, at a period of time, and this is so variable because I've worked with so many patients over the last 10 years, and then working in the gyms, and when I managed hundreds of personal trainers and thousands of clients, we saw the same thing happen. It's like all of a sudden now, the exercise that I'm doing, the decreased intake of calories that I'm still doing is no longer producing weight loss. How is that possible when we look at the laws of thermodynamics, which really float around calories in versus calories out? I'm not eating more, assuming we've accounted for that, and I didn't change my exercise. So what's going on? So when we look at the body, what is actually happening what is actually happening from a physiological perspective is you have what we call metabolic down regulation of your metabolism. Meaning the thyroid output, right? Because our thyroid is one of our master hormones that releases thyroid hormone. It's that thyroid hormone that influences every single cell in your body, that revs up the mitochondria and drives that process of literally utilizing energy. It's energy utilization at its core is driven by activation from your thyroid hormone. So in this plateaued state, if you were to test someone's thyroid, you will likely see in most cases a decrease in thyroid output, which there's many ways to see that, but my favorite is actually looking at free fraction hormones, not TSH, which is the precursor that stimulates the production of thyroid hormones, but actually looking at free T4, free T3. And in many cases, you will see that on labs. But it's not just a laboratory observation. You will literally see thyroid symptoms, hypothyroid symptoms that you didn't have before, right? So I'm gonna list them here on the screen, because if you think you're in a plateau or you know you're in a plateau, you can confirm it by knowing that, hey, I didn't have these symptoms before this plateau and now I do, okay? So the big ones are, the obvious is you're no longer losing weight, right? Difficulty losing weight. But then you have decreased levels of energy. You have brain fog. You have you feel colder. You might be getting hair loss when it gets more severe, achy body, constipation, just overall not feeling as well. Of course, why would you feel as well if you have half or even less of the freaking master hormone that drives the ability for your body to utilize energy, okay? We can confirm this phenomena if those symptoms started somewhere around the time or a little bit after that plateau started. Okay, we call that battery saving mode, because I like to communicate this in a way that makes sense. If you've ever had a laptop, you put it in battery saving mode. What's so annoying about that, right? The screen turns off really fast. You can't run as many applications. It's slower. It lasts longer, right? You will literally live longer in battery saving mode, an extra 5 to 10 to 15 years, depending on how severe the restriction is. But the quality of life is severely decreased because another way to think about it is your body is figuring out a way to run off of half of the energy, depending on how much down regulation there is. I've seen so many patients come to us where they are eating freaking 800, 900 calories a day when the average TEE, which we're gonna talk about later, total energy expenditure, is somewhere between 1,900 and 3,000, depending on multiple variables. So literal zombies walking around is the way I see it because of many reasons, but one of them is because of GLP-1 medication explosion. Semaglutide, tirzepatide being so amazing, and I have plenty of other videos where I talk about that, but this is part of the dark side. Unfortunately, a lot of people are not getting the guidance, the structure, the support to even know what this metabolic downregulation looks like, and let alone how to prevent it. A lot of people are walking around with no clue that the amount of food that they're eating is significantly less than the amount that they should, because they notice when they start eating more, they start gaining weight. And that's one of the classic signs of being in a plateau. It doesn't take much to gain weight. And you're in this panic state because you're like, oh my gosh, now I have to exercise and eat less just to maintain my weight. Does this sound all too familiar to you? Let me know in the comments, because it does to me. Because I lost 100 pounds, and for a decade, I struggled to maintain it. And so trust me, I know this experience all too well, and it freaking sucks. Okay, so we have an understanding of what the plateau is, what is literally happening in the body, that, not the why yet, but what is the actual physiological mechanisms. So now let's talk about the why, because that's important to understand, and I think it'll help at least motivate you to understand the solution, what I have found. We gotta take it back to ancestral times here for a second. Earliest human beings have been around for about 3 million years. For the majority of 3 million years, we have not had steady states of food. And it wasn't until agricultural times about 10,000 years ago did we have steady states supplies of food. And so for the majority of human history, we've had to survive through periods of time where there was very inconsistent food because they had to get out there and hunt and kill and secure their meals. And so the ancestors that survived were the ones that developed mechanisms to be able to survive those longer periods of famine, right? This is a lot of things, the ability to store fat, run off of fat. I talked about that in my solution to weaning off medications video. But the other big thing is the ability for your body to go, okay, this lack of food concerns me, let me turn the dial down. Because imagine if it didn't turn the dial down and you kept burning the same amount of calories, you would cease to exist much sooner. And so your body developed this internal mechanism to respond to this trend. And I always call it a trend because it's not a black and white thing. It's not an overnight phenomenon. It develops over time. It also develops over time in reaction to the extremeness of the deficit, right? So a bigger caloric deficit will take a shorter period of time. We know that. A smaller deficit will take a longer period of time, but it's pretty much inevitable for most people that they will experience this calorically restriction-induced plateau, which is created because the trend of the calories is decreasing and the body in a state of survival mode says, I want to keep you alive, I'm concerned, let's start turning the dial down. Unfortunately, we don't know. I really don't have any other explanation as to why John could starve off 100 pounds with no plateau and starve to insinuate a more aggressive restriction that would induce a plateau sooner, and it doesn't for him. And Mary loses freaking 15 pounds with a slower deficit and she plateaus. Genetics, maybe toxic exposure, who knows? I don't have that one figured out for you guys, and I certainly won't stop researching, but there's something there. The good news is it doesn't really matter what that is because I have the solution for you, and now we're about to get into it. So we understand the mechanics of it, we understand what it is, and we understand why, as human beings, we have this. Okay, so how do you fix it? I know you're freaking ready and you're excited. So in a basic sense, and we're gonna expand on it, you just do the opposite of what got you into it. I hope you're answering the question, what got you into it? I'll give you a couple seconds. It was that caloric trend, right? That deficit over time. So what's the opposite of that? A caloric surplus over time, right? The opposite trend. Your body is gonna keep you in that metabolically downregulated state that it decided to do in reaction to the environment, right? Until it realizes or decides that that need to survive is no longer there. And the only thing that I figured out so far is a caloric surplus over time. Now, side note, guys, caloric restriction over time is not the only cause of a weight loss plateau. I have separate videos. I actually have a really good podcast with Dr. Dan Kellums. I call him the Functional Wizard, and I'm looking forward to many more conversations. There are definitely other causes of plateaus, like a micronutrient deficit, but I find that it's the calories that is significantly the most common reason, so we're just gonna focus on that one. So we need to put our bodies into a caloric surplus over time so that the body can go, I don't need to freak out anymore. It's good, it's chill. Everything looks good, let's crank it back up to normal, because I wanna crank it back up to normal. I want my metabolism revving the way I want it, right? There's a reason my body burns 2,500 calories every single day at rest, because it's determined that's the amount of energy that it needs for optimal function, all right? I don't like being suppressed, but I'm gonna do it to keep you alive. This is Dr. Jones' version of the metaphorical body speaking to itself, I don't know. Okay, so a lot of people call this the reverse diet. I think that's a great name. I call it a reset. It's what I do. So the reset consists of increasing the patient's calories over time. And so you need to figure out how many calories you've been averaging, say the last month on a daily basis, right? So if you've never counted calories, you're gonna have to suck it up and start counting calories. Now, I hate making patients count calories. It's not sustainable long-term for the majority of people. And one of my favorite influencers that I look up to is Dr. Layne Norton. And I appreciate and love a lot of where he comes from. And I mention him because he helps me see things not so funnel vision, take a step back of what I think works and not forgetting the literature. Okay, so now the reset, caloric surplus over time. So I call it a reset. Layne Norton, one of my mentors, calls it a reverse diet. Whatever you call it, it's just an increase in calories over time. Now, when it comes to counting calories, I hate making people count calories. And Layne Norton will tell you, Dr. Norton loves counting calories. And because I appreciate where he comes from and he teaches me a lot, I've realized that it's not great to tell people counting calories is bad. So now I've actually flipped my script to state, hey, if you enjoy counting calories, go for it. What I've observed is about 99% of people, I think, don't like to do that long term, and that's why my solution revolves around not having to. But there is something to be said about if you're in that category and you love it, great. You should do that for the rest of your life, because you'll get better results if you actually adhere to counting calories for life. It's just most people don't want to do that. Now, this counting calorie experiment, this is what I make my patients do. About 3 to 4 weeks at the beginning of their program, we make them count their calories. And I call it a counting calorie experiment because it's got a defined period of time. And then unless they discover they're that 1% and they want to keep it going, if they're like, Dr. Jones, I can't wait to stop, then great, you can stop. What I have found is by making them count their calories for 3 to 4 weeks, whether it be during the reset, or even if they're not doing a reset and they're starting my program because they don't need to, because they're not in a plateau, I still make them do this for 4 weeks. So this counting calorie experiment is where you just start counting your calories. It's really simple. My favorite way is getting a MyFitnessPal app. There's many apps to do it, and you just figure out a system that is good for you, whether it's a physical journal with a pen, or whether it's on your phone and the notepad, or whether it's an app, I don't care. But forcing yourself to confront calories and put in the work, we developed this thing that I like to call a calorie counting intuition. And that's nice. I rely on calorie counting intuition and teach my patients to use it. I wouldn't say rely on it because it's not solely on that, but it's definitely one of the tools in their belt to help them have a better grasp of what they're eating, right? Because a lot of times if you never counted calories, you have no idea that some things can be so calorically dense. Peanut butter and honey come to mind because, yeah, those are, maybe not peanut butter, maybe almond butter. Almond butter and honey could be considered good foods for you, but they are extremely caloric dense. And that spoon that you think is 1 tablespoon, 130 calories, is probably 2 or 3. So little things like that, a slice of pizza being 300, 400 calories. I remember when I first learned that back in my teenage years, I was like, there's that many calories in 1 slice of pizza? It's freaking crazy. So you do learn some intuition, appreciation, and respect for foods that you think that you didn't realize are as dense, calorically speaking, as they actually are. It's a great thing. Okay, now going back to the reset, it's a side note there, but we also make you count calories during the reset because we need a starting point, right? Because what we're gonna do week by week is we're going to increase your calories. I like somewhere between 200 to 300. A lot of variables go into that. Individual recommendations are made for our patients, but the general gist for the sake of this video is we establish a starting point, which is what you've been eating, and you increase it about 200 to 300 calories. So let's just say 200 for the sake of this video every single week. So if you are we find out that you've been averaging about 1,400 a day. Week number 1, I might start at 15 just because your guess at 1,400 could be wrong. So I'll start the first week with a small increase, maybe 100 above what they think it is. Bam. And then next week, it might be a 200 calorie jump. Now, within each week, our patients, since there's back and forth communication, we're doing this with them, what we're looking for is clinical confirmation that what we're doing is right. So what do I mean by that? Especially if you're doing this on your own, you don't have Dr. Jones to talk to during this, but you are looking for confirmation that your body likes what you're doing. So number 1, not gaining weight. If you are increasing your consumption of calories and you are not gaining weight, that's a good sign. That's a good sign because that means your metabolism is likely speeding up. Of course, there's compounding variables in there. Maybe 2 more weeks of not gaining weight, you'll have a stronger confirmation, but it looks good that we're not gaining weight and we're eating more. And the second thing is looking at those symptoms. Now, there's a lot of low thyroid symptoms, but the ones that I find that tend to turn on or off quicker would be the energy levels and the brain fog, maybe constipation. So those are the 3 that I always tell patients to look, document, and do you see improvements in it? Like, how brain foggy are you on a scale of 1 through 10? Where's your energy levels? And then next week, as you're weighing yourself to determine whether or not you lost or gained or maintained, then you reassess on a scale of 1 through 10 so that you have something that you quantified earlier that you can now assess. And it doesn't necessarily improve on week 1. As long as it's not getting worse and it's at least the same, if not better, we move on. Eventually, usually almost always, if it didn't improve by the first week, it's going to improve by the second week. And we just keep playing that game, guys. What we're shooting for during the reset is hitting the TEE. Talked about that earlier. Total energy expenditure, which is the total amount of calories your body is supposed to be burning every single day to maintain rate. Now, the TE can be broken down in multiple categories that, truthfully, I don't think we really need to get into all the categories. One important category to understand is the BMR, which is the basal metabolic rate, which is the measurement of calories your body expends if you were to sit down and not move 24 hours a day. It is the literal amount of calories that the internal machinery of your body requires in order to maintain its weight. And then we have the everything else, which has multiple categories. But truthfully, the BMR is somewhere around 75%. It could be less if you're out there running 100 miles a day like David Goggins, okay, fine. But truthfully, David Goggins' metabolism is probably downregulated so much to offset the amount that he's burning that he's probably still at a neutral spot and we talk about that in several other videos. So the majority of the calories you burn is not from your exercise, is not from the amount of movement you do. It is from that basal portion. So the rest of it comes from your activity level, your exercise, and there's also this thing where the amount of movement you do that's not exercise, that's that involuntary movement, cool thing. But again, I just put that in the non-BMR category. Those together, that's the TEE. Now you can go online to a simple calculator. We'll link to my favorite one here. Something interesting that I've observed with patients over the last 15 to 20 years is that, this is classically true most of the time, is that the TEE calculators always spit out numbers that are about 10 to 20% higher than what actually tends to be reality. Couldn't tell you, don't have a clue, would love to ask other experts why, if they've noticed the same or not. I have classically noticed that for the past 20 years. Take that for what it is. The TEE, whether you're shooting for the full amount or within 15, 20% of that, I'm really happy. In the reset, if we can get our patients from where they were at all the way up to the point where they're eating at least within 15-20% of the TEE. And then bam, they're out of battery saving mode. The metabolism is as fast as it could have been. And now we're ready to rock and roll on some weight loss.
Quick minute here. I wanted to tell you guys about my free resources to help you guys with your sustainable weight loss goals. I have a free Facebook community where I do weekly live coaching. It's all about helping you hit your goals and maintain your weight for the rest of your life. And I also have a free PDF where I break down step by step exactly what it takes for you to be successful. I'll put a link to this in the show, and we'll see you guys back in the show.
Remember when I talked about at the beginning of this video how the other solution that you could totally do, and I hear patients tell me that their doctors will tell them this, or that it's just crazy the amount of misunderstanding people have on this topic. But when someone hits a plateau, there's this idea that we just got to adjust the calories again. Your BMR has slowed down, so let's just burn more, or let's just eat less. Now, the only time that could be a solution would be if you barely hit your first stage of down regulation and you're still eating a decent amount. Okay, fine, maybe increase the deficit before you do a reset. But personally, I would always recommend resetting and getting our metabolism back to maximal efficiency, even in a partial metabolically down-regulated state, because I want my body running maximally 24/7. I don't know about you, but I appreciate maximal, at least amount of brain fog and maximal brain power. That's just me though. Also, I like to be able to eat more food and not gain weight. Okay, so we now know how to beat the plateau. And finally, I want to talk about how to prevent it. So in our program with patients, I developed over time this, and this is all intuition, clinical observation, figuring this out in the trenches. I look forward to where I can find research that backs up what I'm saying. I always try to be as transparent with you guys as I possibly can. What's backed up by data, what's not, what's partially, and anything else. So in this case, this is what I've been doing for patients for the past 20 years, and it seems to work. Well, this approach towards the reset has really been something that I've developed over the past 5 years with the development of the Flow protocol, which is my structured approach towards prolonged fasting, and that's how we accomplish lasting weight loss with our patients. But we gotta take it back and think about, okay, so now we understand that it's that calorie deficit trend that initiated the plateau, right? So how can we accomplish weight loss without that calorie deficit over time? I want you to think about this for a second. How can we accomplish weight loss on a weekly basis, let's say, without having this continual message to your body every single day that we're in a deficit? Hopefully now you're like, wasn't that the Flow protocol? Maybe you haven't seen my other videos. So the Flow protocol, what we accomplish with our patients is getting them to a point where they're fasting for 36 or to 48 hours every single week. That's somewhere around 3,500 to 4,500 calories of a deficit, which happens to be even more than a pound of body fat, which is 3,500 calories. So that's a massive deficit. That's all the fat that I want a patient to lose in an entire week. And then the other 5 days, the instructions for our patients are to eat at your TEE or as close to your TEE as you possibly can. And so what my educated guess at this point from what I've seen worked and doesn't is I think that there's some sort of reaction that's different because the body is not determining that trend, right? Because we're giving it 2 days of a full-blown fast, which by the way, by definition, a fast is the most extreme version of a calorie deficit, right? Over a defined period of time. So we lose all of our week's worth of body fat in a 48-hour period, and then we're eating near our TEE for 5 days. It's a very inconsistent pattern. And I'm presuming that the body goes, all right, we're good. That was extreme. You lost a lot of fat, but now we're back to good. We're back to normal. And then we do it again. And then we do it again. And then we do it again, week by week. I'm not saying I don't have patients that still hit a plateau in my program, but because we recommend GLP-1 medications like tirzepatide, and they're so powerful at suppressing appetite, the problem is, it's like the thing that we have to navigate around with our patients is the freaking tirzepatide is so powerful that they're struggling to eat at their TEE. And so calorie deficit here, that's massive. Calorie deficit here, they hit a plateau. So this is where the weekly coaching comes in, and we ensure that they don't do that, and then they're fine and they're getting amazing results. But that would be my explanation to the potential plateaus that we do get, but it's significantly less. Having done weight loss in the gym setting before I even became a doctor of chiropractic, working with managing the personal trainers, and we had big gyms back at 24 and LA Fitness that we would manage, and this was before fasting became popular, just that caloric restriction over time. This phenomena that I observed was always consistently true. That calorie deficit over time will eventually turn this on. And it's a trend, it's a trend, it's a trend. So the flow protocol is not a trend, it's inconsistent. So I look forward to the future to where we can look at that and actually study the effects of a calorie restriction that's contained within 2 days and then high on 5 days, and what that means in terms of the metabolic reaction, whether it's downregulated or not. But I can tell you it's working with us, it's working in my patients, and this is why people are reaching out to us every single day. So that's it, everybody. That is the weight loss plateau. I hope that helped you with information that you are ready to implement and you are ready to beat this plateau that you're stuck on so that you can continue lasting weight loss. If you enjoyed watching this video, guys, then I'm gonna link to another one right now that's very important, and I like to think of it as the next step in the lasting weight loss triage. We'll see you guys later.